Hello, and welcome to this Autism Ontario webinar. It's a panel discussion that we've titled Positive Advocacy, Helping Your Voice and the Voice of Your Loved Ones Be Heard. As always, my name is Matthew Lay, and I will be your host. The topic of positive advocacy is timely as we move closer to the provincial election. We continue to live during a time when people's competing priorities have created an urgent need for positive advocacy to ensure the lives of marginalized Ontarians and their families are accepted, cared for, and respected. Today, we will discuss the experiences of the barriers and challenges faced by our panelists and those they love. They will share with us their insights into the conditions and systems that create these barriers and challenges, and what role positive advocacy has in how they choose to respond to these barriers. We hope that out of these discussions, you may hear new ways to approach challenges in your lives and learn from some of the experiences and wisdom shared by our panelists. We really do have a great group here with us. Now, on this particular topic, I've got a couple disclaimers that I gotta get out of the way. First, the opinions reflected in this webinar are those of the speakers and the presenters and do not necessarily reflect Autism Ontario's views. Please note that Autism Ontario does not endorse any specific therapy, product treatment, strategy, opinions, service, or individual. We do, however, endorse your right to information. Autism Ontario strongly believes it is important to do your own research and make your own informed decisions. And finally, some of our panelists have done work at different levels of government. The views they express today are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of any specific federal or provincial party or agency. Wow, that was a lot, right? Now that I got that out of the way, I just got to remind you about how tonight is going to work, and then we're going to get right into it. So first off, you're seeing me on video, and throughout the night, you're going to see all of our panelists. And off to my side, there is a question box. Enter your questions there, and I will work as diligently as I can to get your answers responded to. If you have any issues throughout the night, click on the help button. And I will also be referencing items from the resource library. That's right below us in the handouts. There, we've got some resources that will help sort of inform our conversation that we are having today. Okay, so let's start to get into this. And what I'd like to do to begin is I'd like to introduce you to our panelists. So I'm gonna start by welcoming to the stage Courtney. Courtney, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Matt, for the introduction. I am Courtney Weaver. I am a self-advocate. I'm also very much engaged in the fields of autism and accessibility. A few of my professional roles include self-advocate advisor for the Housing Through an Autism Lens project coordinator for the Work from Home project for CASDA, and also office assistant to MP Mike Lake, who is also an autism advocate. And that's just a few roles that I have done and I'm currently doing.
You got a master's in critical disability studies at York. What drew you to this line, or what drew you to getting into advocacy the way that you have?
It started when I was an undergraduate student at Queen's University. I'm fortunate in the sense that it wasn't because of facing a particular systemic barrier that inspired me to go on self-advocacy. It was as a result of individuals around me who saw my potential and thought that I would be a good fit for Disability Awareness Month events that were being held then at Queen's University. As an undergraduate student in my first year, my then TA, Stephanie Cork, and also the Queen's Equity Advisor, Heidi Penning, thought that I might be a good fit for taking part in Queen's University Disability Awareness Month events. And I consistently did that for all of my years as an undergraduate student. That included speaking at one of the campus libraries, Stauffer Library, for various audiences, as well as different parts of campus, and also taking part in the public release of the then issue of ABLE magazine, which is the Queen's University magazine on disability issues.
Wow.
And what inspired me in particular to go into the master's route that I did was that the Queen's Equity Advisor, Heidi Penning, had heard about a York University then student in the program. She has since graduated and is now an alumni, who was coming to Queen's University campus. And this now York University alumni's name, her name is Melissa Vassallo. And she was presenting at Queen's University campus about the time in her life where, just after getting her undergraduate degree at Queen's University, she ended up in a car accident and temporarily had to use a wheelchair in order to get around. She was able to be mobile again. She was on her own 2 feet, and when I saw her as an undergraduate student, but it was her experience for that time where she had to be in a wheelchair to get around, and seeing the change in how some people would act around her, and not necessarily for the better. So it was hearing her story about the program that she was in, and also Heidi Penning, who referred me to the event that got me on the master's route that I did. And it was participating at Disability Awareness Month events on campus that got me started in advocacy.
Wow. So
Yeah.
you look pretty young, but it sounds like just a ton of experience. Really looking forward to the conversation. Next, I'm going to go to Charlene Davidson. You are the sibling of a person with a developmental disability. Can you talk to us a little bit about what brings you here and your path to positive advocacy?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'm Charlene Davidson. I live in Ottawa with my husband and 2 children. And I'm here today to bring a perspective of a sibling. So I have an older brother who has a developmental disability. And growing up, it's something that I've always known, that the care of my brother would eventually transition to me. And my parents started that process several years ago when they moved my brother and themselves from southwestern Ontario to the Ottawa region, so that we can begin that process to get my brother settled and to get all of his affairs and our family plan started for when my parents age. So you could say I was born into it in a way, or something I've been preparing for most of my life, and something that I continue to learn, the advocacy part, at least.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I'm interested to see your path to advocacy, since it's been something that you were born into, and what those sort of steps were. Um, okay, our last panelist is Sharon Grant. Sharon is an educator and also an advocate. Talk to us a little bit about your journey to our little webinar stage this evening.
Sure. Thanks very much. And again, it's great to be here with my fellow panelists this evening. I would say advocacy started for me as a result of being a mother of a young gentleman who's now 25, who's on the autism spectrum. And so that kind of thrust me into that world. Just understanding autism, understanding his needs and his areas of strength, and then advocating for that, going to school, sitting in different school support team meetings and identification placement and review committee meetings, IPRCs, and really ensuring that the profile that was presented of my son was one that was asset-based and not merely deficit-based. I wasn't always confident in those meetings because I attended those meetings before I became an educator. So becoming an educator has been a second career for me. Before that, I was a full-time parent. And that actually worked out quite well because it was during that time that my son was diagnosed. And so I was able to spend a few years just getting involved in the system, educating myself, meeting other families whose children have a variety of disabilities, but we're still along that same journey, that our children don't necessarily fit in that perfectly put together box. And so we are now fighting for supports and services and understanding in the health system and the education system and in society in general, supports and understanding, not just merely tolerance, but understanding and that creative out of the box thinking so that our children, loved ones, siblings can have that quality of life that perhaps they're typically developing sibling or cousin or best friend has access to just by right of birth. As you've mentioned, I am an educator here in Toronto. I live in East Toronto. And as a result of my journey of raising a son with a disability, I met a lot of families along the way over the years, a lot of racialized families, Black families, and oftentimes we would go, well, I know myself, I would go to different parent support groups and I might be the only racialized person sitting in the room or maybe one of a few. And although the groups were great, there was sometimes something missing, just that cultural lens in addressing the issues that we were facing with our loved one. And over the years, many of us were saying, it might be good if someone could start a group for Black families. And over the years, I saw different groups and agencies and programs that were culturally based. And I thought, but I kept looking, well, where is there something for Black families? Where is there something for us? And I didn't see anything. So in November 2020, my husband and I actually started a Black parent support group, which is now called Selbona Afrocentric Circle of Support. And we meet a couple of times a month. And that's one of the big pieces of it is empowering and educating the families, the siblings that attend these meetings and teach them how to advocate positively, teaching them and sharing with them the power of their voice to make a significant change, not just for their loved one, but in society as a whole. So really as a result of my son and his diagnosis back in the year 2000, that's really what thrust me into this world of positive advocacy.
Amazing, amazing. So we've got a couple different perspectives here, right? A couple different places that we all come from, but it sounds like in every situation we've arrived at the same spot, not just meeting this webinar, but a place of positive advocacy. Okay. For our audience, a reminder, submit your questions at any time in the ask question box. It's right beside me, right here, and I'll look to get answers. But until we get our questions from our audience, I've got a couple questions. So we know how you got here, a little bit on that. I know the journey is quite more complex than that. But what I want to start with is I want to hear a story of when you've used positive advocacy in your life. And I'm going to start with you, Courtney, if you don't mind. Why don't can you just tell us a story about when you've used positive advocacy in your life?
Oh, certainly, Matt. So one example of where I used positive advocacy in my life was that in 2017, I was invited to be a speaker at an event called Autism on the Hill, which is hosted on Parliament Hill. Well, it hasn't in the past couple of years because of COVID-19, but it has consistently annually been an event held at Parliament Hill, hosted by Suzanne Jacobson, who is the founder and director of Quick Start Autism. She organizes the speakers, and it's an opportunity for about an hour in the afternoon on Parliament Hill. Self-advocates and family members and or professionals otherwise who are engaged in the world of autism have an opportunity to give 1-minute speeches. In 2017, I was given the opportunity to be one of the self-advocate speakers. In my 1-minute speech, I included several ways to positively address autism, and these were geared for self-advocates, teachers and parents, and also policymakers. After I gave my speech, a mother from the audience ended up coming up to me and opened up and told me her story of advocating on behalf of her son, who was also diagnosed on the autism spectrum. So it was my being a positive advocate right there that was incentive for somebody else to open up about their story of advocating.
Right, right. And I think that a lot of people, I mean, at that time when you were when you were asked, because you said in your intro that you were asked to do a lot of this stuff, I'm sure that there was some insecurity about why me, like why am I the one who is sort of being asked there. So it's great to hear you do that and come out with such a a positive outcome from that experience. I'm going to ask the same question of Charlene here. Charlene, can you give us an example of when you've used positive advocacy in your journey?
Sure. So, just for some context, my brother lives independently in an apartment, but does require daily support in order to do so. So, for example, he requires assistance for cooking, cleaning, some personal care, as well as transportation for activities and so forth. During COVID, we unfortunately lost some of our care, some personal support workers who were not able to work. And my parents had actually brought my brother back into their home to live with them for a number of months, and were basically fulfilling all of his daily care 7 days a week. For months on end. In the fall of last year, for the first time, my mother reached out and asked for help. And so we had thought it would be a good time to have DSO take a look at my brother's assessment and have it updated. But given the enormous wait times and the long process to have that done, we needed something more immediate to help our family. So I started talking to people, trying to find out what services were they using in their families or in their siblings' homes to assist them. And I was able to find basically a non-traditional organization for developmental disabilities. It's called Champlain Lynn. It's a home and community support service in Ontario to assist us. And so we went through the application process with that organization. And I was able to arrange for a personal support worker for 5 days a week for my brother, 1 hour a day. So it's still not meeting his needs, but it was better than nothing. And it took a load off my parents and gave them some relief. And so we've had a very good outcome with that.
Yeah. So when you said you asked around, it was to other caregivers, parents, families that you kind of knew? Is that the approach you took to initially? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. And so, one of the things that I feel is so important is building your network. And that's something I'm still learning to do as a sibling. Parents have been working at this, and they've dedicated themselves for years on advocating for their children. But when that caregiving and advocacy work transitions to a sibling, it can be a learning curve for the sibling. And so I'm still in the middle of that, trying to figure it out. And so, and I can talk a little bit more in depth about it later, about the Siblings Canada, which I'm involved in, which is a terrific resource for siblings. And I was able to get some really good advice about looking at organizations that wasn't directly linked to Developmental Services on Ontario, so what I call non-traditional organizations, but we're still able to offer services of value to my brother and our family.
We have an audience question regarding, and I already forget the name of the organization. I apologize, but the one you first mentioned that you were able to get help from, is it a publicly funded organization?
It is, yeah. And so it's called Champlain Lynn, LHIN. If you have the website link, you can put it up in the chat there. But it's typically a home and community support service used for anybody in Ontario that requires a personal support worker at home. So, for example, an elderly person who needs home care, or somebody who's had some kind of surgery in a hospital and needs some home care after. There is eligibility criteria you have to meet. So you have to demonstrate that the type of care that needs to be provided can be provided by a personal support worker. But they do provide things such as basic cooking or meal preparation, simple house cleaning, or like personal care, bathing, dressing, that sort of thing.
Excellent. Well, I'm told the link is in the handouts right below us, so people can go ahead and go there. Thanks so much. I'm going to do the same. Ask the question one final time here to Sharon. Get her in here, Sharon. If you give us an example of positive advocacy in your experience.
Well, I think, there's, as a parent, there's several stories I could share, but I'll even go all the way back to when I first got my son diagnosed. When, as a mom, I had concerns about his development, I started off with speech and language services. I'd seen an article in our local newspaper, and because I knew, okay, there's something, funny here. He's delayed. He's my second child. I have two boys, and he's the second. And my oldest son is like his mother, quite verbal, quite social, no issue with speech development. But with my younger son, he really was only speaking in just individual words. There's a little bit of echoing, echolalia would be the term. So I thought, okay, there's something up here. So he's just a little bit over 2. So I took him to speech pathology, and we did a few sessions there, and it was with the Toronto program. And after I did everything diligently to support him, I still didn't see the language burst taking place. And at this time, I was a full-time caregiver, but as well as I was running my own home daycare. And so there was other children in the home for him to be social with, but still, he's playing differently. He's interacting with the children differently. There's something going on here. So after speaking to a couple of dear friends of mine at my church, who also happened to be educators, they knew what was up with my son. They didn't tell me at the time, but they knew. So they really pushed me to get him an assessment, to go to a pediatrician and get the full checkout, with him. So when I went to my doctor, he didn't agree with me. He pushed back, and he said, no, I think you might be jumping the gun here. He's a boy, and boys walk late, and boys talk late. And, there was a few things like that with my oldest boy, but, a parent knows, a mom knows, those little spidey senses are tingling. No, it's not just lateness here. I think there's something deeper. I didn't know anyone on the spectrum, at least not at that time. I might have seen people with developmental disabilities or autism spectrum disorder, but I didn't know them on a personal level. I didn't know what was up with my son, but I knew there was something. So again, I still have that family doctor today. He's great, and we've ended up being his educator on the world of autism, because I think we were really the first family he had ever, had to deal with. But I had to push. I had to help him understand and trust my judgment as a parent. Work with me here. I could be wrong. I could be out in left field, but what's it going to hurt? Just trust me here. And of course, lo and behold, about 6 months later, once the diagnosis diagnosis came in, to his shock, yes, the diagnosis came back. But that was really my birth into the world of advocacy, and that journey, and refining and working my skills has continued ever since.
Wow, that's 2000. You would like to think that that wouldn't need to be the case, but it is, and I'm sure it's something that we're hearing is probably continuing to go on. So I've got everyone back here, and so we've heard this. We got some examples from you, but I want to start framing this in a way, and we got some examples here that really help people too already with some suggestions, but. Um, when you're looking to make change in whether it be for the broader group or for your loved one, your caregiver, whatever, or whoever, who are the people that you have found help make the change? I'll throw it out to the panel. Anyone can answer. Who do you find has been helpful in making change, whether it be for you, your loved one, or for the broader community?
I could start.
Go for it.
I would say you need to have people in your corner. I would say that initially it was parents, other caregivers that I met, whether it be I'm taking my child to a social skills group or to some type of athletic activity, let's say at Variety Village. I know it's a very famous facility here in Toronto, in southern Toronto. But speaking to other parents, I found that was very helpful to me. Regardless of our backgrounds, our identities, what we had in common was wanting the best outcomes for our loved one, whether we're raising our child, our niece, our nephew, our grandchild. We want those best outcomes. And speaking to parents who maybe were a little bit ahead of the game, whose children were a little bit older, so they'd kind of been there, done that, and getting the inspiration from them. So I'd say that was an initial start for me. I would say next followed by family members. So my husband, and even my older son, especially as he got older, and just having their support and their belief behind me. Friends, whether they be family friends, church friends, friends from your place of worship. So, I mean, I think Charlene alluded to that earlier, is building those networks. And I think, we talk about building networks for our loved one, but we ourselves, as that advocate for that loved one, we need to build our own network, our own circle of support, because it can be overwhelming at times advocating. It can be intimidating at times advocating. And there are definitely barriers and humps that we have to jump over. So if we have that strong network behind us, I find that can be very helpful. That even though you may not even win that first time you knock on that door, when you got that strength, that you got that strength behind you, that can give you that added resilience to keep fighting, keep advocating, keep speaking up, in order to get your needs met and the needs of your loved one met.
Incredible, Sharon. They got a question directly for you before we move on, and it's from our audience. They say, Sharon, are your experience advocating alongside adults on the spectrum different from childhood advocacy?
I'm going to say yes. I find that with the children, I think there's a bit more sympathy, if that's the right word, and more willingness to support a child who's in need. Again, my son is 25 now, so I think this is year 4. He went all the way up to 21 in school because he does have extra needs. So he was not a college bound or post-secondary bound young man. So he's more of a hands-on learner. And so advocating for him now most definitely is more difficult, helping people understand what his needs are, but even the value of him as an adult and helping people to understand he still has gifts that he can offer the world. He still has contributions he can make to this world and that he wants to make to this world. He may not be able to speak for himself. So therefore, I am his voice, his father, his brother, now his sister-in-law. We are his voice, and helping at least get him in that front door so people can give him that chance to see, oh, okay, this young man does have a lot to offer. So the advocacy is different. And definitely I have to dig down deeper at times to really fight for him and to really amplify his voice. So yes, it is different.
It is different. Okay. We might come back to that and look for some strategies when you don't have as much of a sympathy card, but I'm going to go in reverse order from what we did last time. So next up, I know, Charlene, in your intro, you talked about how you went to other parents. Have there been other people that you found have been helpful, other outlets that you've gone to?
So, I said it before about building your network. That includes, a semi-professional network, if you could call that. And I mentioned one example already, which was Siblings Canada. And I think mainly the other one would be the family and friend support. For myself, I am married, and taking over a caregiving role for myself is also something that my entire family will also come on that journey with me. And so having their support as we transition over to this, and what our future may look like together is really important to have their support to do that.
Great. Courtney, to you, can you talk about some people that you have that you think can help make change, that you've had benefit in reaching out to or speaking with?
Oh my goodness. Well, Sharon did cover very well that yes, having people in your corner and also family members can all take part in advocating. I'm lucky in the sense that all consistently my job roles have involved working in a cause that is related to autism or accessibility. In fact, I just quickly found an example of that. One of my previous jobs was working as a contract research and development assistant for the David C. Onley Initiative at Carleton University. The David C. Onley Initiative was primarily examining what would be sustainable means in a post-secondary setting in order to help students with disabilities transition from studying in school to getting work after graduating. And the final report, I have the link of it right here, which I could post in the chat if you want, in order to show the results of the initiative. The work from home project at CASDA is looking at and now putting together this final guide and infographics and video of best work from home practices for self-advocates who are working from home. And the Housing Through an Autism Lens project, we recently had the opportunity to present at the Canadian Autism Spectrum Disorders Alliance Summit, which is an annual conference that's been held for a few years now, where we got to present our work, where we got to elaborate on current issues currently facing autism in housing, such as the double cliff of transitioning in early adulthood and also transitioning to seniorhood. And I mean, my goodness, advocacy and making change. I mean, it's in my personal and also professional network.
Okay. So it's about that network.
That's probably a long-winded answer to your question, but hopefully that gives you an idea that, thanks to the network, I do know several people who are making change, and I'm working with a lot of them in order to help make change for autism.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is you kind of start close, family, friends, those people that you know, and then it becomes evident that you need to build a larger network with groups
Yes.
or with professional organizations. And then from there,
Right.
you know, two of our three panelists who have been at this the longest are actually those who are now the people running said groups and working at said organizations and the
Yes.
like.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not what everyone online is doing. Everyone online, I don't know them all. I
Right.
can't, but my assumption since they are here is a lot of them are looking to learn. And so if you can think, guys can think back to when you started, generally speaking, when you were, going out and looking for those supports, whether it was speaking to other parents or whatever, what was the reception like? Was it generally positive? Is this something that should be scary to first timers? Charlene, you're new to this. Let's start with you. What was the general response like when you started going out and trying to speak to people?
Yeah. So, I mean, the reception at government organizations and agencies, or even those agencies that are funded or non-funded by the province, is generally the same. You're first told that there's a long wait list. It will take several months to complete an application or an assessment. It can be quite discouraging at the beginning, and so to be honest, you just have to be persistent. I feel like as a sibling and as an advocate that I'm basically becoming an expert in navigation of social services now, and the province does not make it easy on people. There is a web of services and organizations that you have to find your way through. And it can be difficult and frustrating and time consuming. But the way that we have succeeded is through persistence. And sometimes that may mean calling your contact at that agency every week to check on, where are we on the wait list, or what's happened to my application, that sort of thing. And so, it can be daunting, but we have had some successes. So I would encourage people to not give up. And be persistent.
Sharon, you've been, at this a lot longer, gone out and created, your own groups in some cases. Do you remember what it was like when you were first starting, what the responses were like from folks you went and spoke to? And as a follow-up to that, because we got to it, and it's an elephant in the room. We all know how challenging it is to get assists in this province. Is advice for how to navigate the web as it was just put.
Yeah. Charlene echoed a lot of what I was thinking. And it's kind of disappointing, for those who are watching the webinar now, or perhaps later will watch the taping of it later. It's rather disappointing that this is still the case. Again, I guess I've been on this journey. My son is 25, so 21 years I've been on this journey, and it's rather disappointing that it's still such a web. But back then, it was definitely overwhelming. Intimidating, overwhelming, because you feel that pressure. You feel that pressure when your child is young to get their needs met. Because you read and you're doing your research and you're talking to other families, and everything's about early intervention. Things are also quite costly, at least back then. I'm sure it's the same. We're quite costly. And so you're also looking at funding, free resources, and so on. So you're looking at all of those things. So there's definitely a lot of pressure put on parents, caregivers, that pressure of time, that pressure that you don't want to let down your loved one. So you're feeling that pressure, and then trying to understand the system. And I am an English speaker. I was not born in Canada. I've been raised here, so I've gone through the Canadian Ontario school system successfully. So I did do well in school. And so, an English speaker. So I understand how the education system here works for the most part. I understand how the health care system works here. I can only imagine for someone who is a newcomer, who is not a native English speaker, who themselves perhaps has some type of disability, learning disability, or so on. I can only imagine that added obstacle it would add to it. But for myself, I just started small. So again, at one or two parent support groups, or again, I'm sitting at Variety Village or down at the Geneva Center, and you're in that waiting room while your child is in program, and you start talking and you start sharing those stories, and you hear about someone else's ups and downs, and you start to counsel and support one another. And then you start to be inspired. Okay, if they can do it, I can do it. And you go and you try. And you knock on that door and you ask those questions. And yes, even at that time, I was knocking on politicians' doors and writing letters. And that's not something I ever thought I would ever do. But I knew I needed to do that, not only for my child, but I also thought about those families who may have added barriers. I'm like, I gotta fight this fight for my child, because hopefully if they make changes for my child, someone else will benefit from it as well. And then as you're in it longer, you do gain more confidence. You do gain more understanding and know-how of how the system works, and unfortunately how the game goes. And you start to understand the rules of that game, and you start to play that game. Until you can start to call the shots. So that's what I recall when he was younger. And then they leave high school, and then it's a whole other game. Now you jump to another game board, and now you got to relearn those rules of engagement. And again, you meet other parents. Some parents who I've known since Isaiah was first diagnosed, we continue to connect. Some of them are a part of the support group, and others I've kept in touch with over the years. And so now that we're in this new season of this journey, we continue to share ideas, share our ups, our downs, our struggles, share our little cheat sheets that we've created over the years, and we continue in that battle and sharing with one another, and spreading that wealth with other families who may not know what they don't know.
Excellent. Courtney, we'll end with you on this. I think you're a little bit of an insider here, working with some of these groups that maybe can help. But what has your experience been reaching out in an advocacy perspective, and what stories or help can you share?
Okay, so advocacy. Well, I could mention my most recent example, which was presenting at the Housing Through an Autism Lens project at the CASDA Summit. The idea, as I said, was to present the work that the project had been doing, and hopefully all the summit attendees who were able to look at that presentation had gotten great information, knowing what the current difficulties in terms of autism and housing currently are, such as the lack of options that might be available when the self-advocate is at a point in early adulthood. And so the idea of moving out of their parents' house is first going to be approached, but then finding that right housing fit can be difficult. And then there's the additional cliff when the self-advocate is transitioning into seniorhood. And if they've been living in their parents' house until middle age, which, as we learned from the project, has a lot of times turned out to be the case, then the parents are slowly but surely they're aging, and so they can no longer be the primary source of support. And so then that challenge then gets transferred to the siblings. And if that's not in place, then potential serious consequences such as homelessness are very much a sad reality for individuals, self-advocates who get older. And so, and hopefully that has informed a lot of people about current challenges and also know the next steps of what's being done. The Housing Through an Autism Lens project is all but finished. A final report is yet to be released to the general public, but next steps such as the National Housing Network, which is being worked out with the organizations and other subject matter experts who were involved in the project, that is being developed. Also, additional steps such as Paradigm Shifts project, which is more of a autism language examining project, and then also a policy brief on autism and housing is in development or is out right now. I'd have to double check the status on that, but making sure that what we have been able to find out in the project and making sure that that conversation continues about autism and housing has been the big priority of the presentation. Hopefully that answers your question.
Perfect. Well, it's good timing, I think, for those reports to be coming out, because one of the reasons we're all here today to talk about advocacy is that we are approaching an election, and elected officials do have the power to make change through policy. Sharon, you started talking about this. You talked about calling up elected officials. You mentioned that the game changes at different times. You also mentioned that you share tips and tricks. So I'm going to be blunt here, and I'm going to ask you to share with us and our audience some tips and tricks for taking that step and calling your MPP or MP or someone, because it's not easy, it's daunting. These are people of power. So what have you learned in your experience that might help everyone?
Well, I would say that they are people of power, in power, people of influence. They're also human. And I think we have to remember that. And so when we approach them, bring your story. Uh, we want to be careful with the emotion, and it's difficult to do as a parent. It's difficult to do, but if we can try and somewhat keep the emotion in check. I'm not saying to necessarily go there and be a robot, but keep that emotion in check and just really try to connect with that influencer and share those stories about your loved one. Again, talking about their gifts, talking about their assets, talking about the contributions that they have made and that they want to continue to make and will make with the support of the governments at large. I think they'll hear you. And if we can work within agencies, uh, the broader, the larger the voice is. Because again, if it's just one off, if it's just myself going to speak, okay, that's one voice. But if we can, be connecting with, various special needs agencies that exist, and if they have political campaigns and you lend your voice to that, well, then now it's maybe 10 voices or 50 voices or 100 voices. Um, then hopefully these politicians will stop and take a listen and bring that voice to the table when they're meeting with their group. So I would say, remember their humanity, bring your humanity, bring your story, um, keep knocking on those doors. Keep letting them know that you exist, your child exists, your child who's now, is an adult or will become an adult. Again, kids are cute, and the world loves children. The world, loves children, and yeah, they definitely can get that sympathy vote, and you can pull out that sympathy card for that child. Not so easy when that child is now an adult. That's still your baby,
Yeah.
but to the world, that's an adult. We have to remind the politicians that our children will soon become adults, and we don't want them to be a burden on society. And I don't even like that term, but we don't want to be dependent on society, and neither does that government at large. So use that opportunity to persuade and to help them see the benefits that we as a society on the whole will have when we put policies and changes in place to help our adults with disabilities.
Have you found in your experience, because it has been vast, that an election cycle is a good time to be heard, or do you have to fight even harder to have your voice heard because there's so many conflicting, priorities as folks are worrying about getting their seat back on in Queen's Park?
I think it's a bit of both. I would agree with you. I think uh, during election time, I would say take full advantage. Go and knock on the door of your local politician at whatever level that is, and present your voice. Bring your loved one with you, so you're not talking about them. As the Indigenous saying goes, and I do respect and appreciate it so much. Not about us, without us. And so ensure, and we do that, my husband and I do that all the time. We make sure we bring our son with us so they can see he's not just a name, he's not just a number. He is a human being just like them and their loved ones, their children, their niece, their nephew, and engage in that conversation. But then even voting times, non-political campaign times, continue as best as you can to keep these issues on their minds and on their hearts. I mean, I know that even with our organization, during non-political times, we brought our organization to the attention of our local politicians at every level, regardless of their party, because we want them to know that we exist. And we have a voice and we have needs and we are in their constituency, and they need to be considering us when they're making decisions and they're going to their table and they're talking about the different issues of concern within their community. So it's a bit of both, but we really want to keep our issues at the forefront of their minds during voting times, but also on the off seasons as well.
All right, Courtney. In your opinion, as we prepare for this upcoming election, what does positive advocacy look like in this for this provincial election? What are some of the things that you suggest people could do to be positive advocates as we get ready to go to the voting booth?
Oh, well, first of all, I would suggest that collaboration with all stakeholder groups who are involved in the whole I guess whole collective group of autism. So self-advocates, parents, clinician, striving to find common ground between each of these particular groups, and also being aware of current challenges would be incredible for positive advocacy during this time of the upcoming election. It is certain. I am a little bit concerned about very real mentions of polarization that have been on the rise, especially in the past few years, regarding certain opinions on various things. So I hope that a spirit of common ground between everyone who's involved in the equation of autism is able to get found during the election, as well as being aware of current challenges. That's what I
So
hope.
definitely important. Yeah, definitely important as well to be talking to both sides of the political spectrum here, and not just the one that might agree with you.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go to Charlene with this question. Imagine you're speaking directly to those politicians right now. What do you hope that every person running for a seat in this upcoming election knew about autism that you think they may not know? What would you hope that you could just tell all of them if you had that voice right now?
Yeah, I think our leaders would be shocked, even themselves, to understand how vastly underfunded our social support system for people with developmental disabilities is. We, hear, that Canada has a housing crisis. Millennials can't afford to buy homes, but nobody's talking about people with disabilities or developmental disabilities, and where are they going to find housing. Cities have wait lists for subsidized housing that can be 15 to 20 years long. And even if your name does get called, it's likely that the housing that's being offered to you is wholly inappropriate for somebody with a developmental disability. For example, a room in a rooming house. It's difficult to put a vulnerable person into a housing situation like that. So the first thing is that, there is a housing crisis for developmental disabled people that is being ignored. And then the second thing is the inequity in support services that's given. In Ontario, most people go through DSO for support services after they age out at 21. But the level of service and the level of funding given to people through the passport program is completely different. You could have somebody who's getting the minimum of $5,000 a year, and other people are getting $30,000 or $40,000 a year. How does that happen? How do families navigate to get the appropriate level of support for their family member? And the entire assessment process is like shrouded in secrecy. Families go through a very intensive assessment process, one-on-one interviews with family members for hours, like 8 hours of interviews. And it's supposed to be a detailed assessment on the actual needs of your loved one. But then this assessment is shipped off to some committee who looks at it and decides what the level of funding and what this person actually needs. And it could not even line up. And the people doing the assessment don't understand the criteria for the level of service given out. They're not allowed to. The actual assessment tool is shielded from them. They're not even allowed to see it. So I think our politicians might be surprised to find out how support services and housing is given out in this province, and the effect it's having on families.
Very, very well put. Before we go, there's something important I want to talk about, and that is how you all stay so resilient. And we knew the challenges going in. We're hearing the challenges on this webinar, but what are some things that you do to ensure that you take care of yourself when you're out, fighting this good fight? And at the same time, because I'm going to go across all three of you with this, if you know of any, the audience is asking if there are any mental health supports directly for caregivers. So what do you do to stay strong in this and take care of yourself? And do you know of any mental health supports? I'm going to start with Sharon, and we'll go through the rest of the group.
Excellent question, because it's so important. The work we do is so emotionally taxing. We really have to take that time up for ourselves. So I know for myself, I'm a woman of faith, very deep faith, and so prayer, and really taking that time to reflect, to pray, to meditate, and kind of that release. Anyone who's a person of faith understands about that release of giving those issues to a higher power. And then, of course, you've got to trust it when you send it over to that higher power. In addition to that, taking good care of myself. And I know and what I mean by that is exercising, which is something I personally love to do. So getting out there for a run, throwing my headphones in my ears, and putting on that music that just helps me to escape whatever that genre of music is. So really physically taking care of myself, spiritually taking care of myself. And then we talked earlier, and I think all three of us talked about it earlier, that support network, whatever that is for you, whether it be your partner, your BFF, your parent. But make sure that you have that circle of support yourself. Those different sisters for different seasons and so on. Make sure you have those people in your life. And for mental health supports, I know that there are some different programs out there that I know I've shared with my support group through the Azrieli Neurodevelopmental Center, which is housing CAMH. I know that they've been running some caregiver programs through there. I believe Autism Ontario also has some programs. So I'm finding of late there's a lot more programming out there for the caregiver, which is wonderful. And it's about time, keep it hooray. And so I'm not sure if when this is all said and done, if some resources can be added to this webinar, and then perhaps us as a panel can share some of those resources with the moderator. But I know that there's more programs out there for caring for the caregiver. They just don't come to mind right now. Many of them virtual, so therefore it's very accessible for you if you're not able to get out of the house. And so definitely try to take advantage of those, because again, you're going to be in a space with other like-minded individuals who understand your struggle, and you can take your time to meet your own needs that way. So those are a few things that I do for myself.
Perfect. And as a default, guys, I say it all the time. If you don't know where to go to Autism Ontario. They will. They have people to help navigate these things. Do they have all the answers? We hope so, but generally speaking, if you're looking for a group or a support like that, they're going to be able to point you into what is available. That is what it is that they do. Courtney, what are your suggestions for keeping resilient and being able to continue fighting the good fight?
Okay, so to be resilient and to keep fighting the good fight, having your network and having at least a few allies in order to maybe talk to if you are feeling or having any moments of, fatigue of when it comes to advocacy is important. Having a variety of methods of taking care of yourself is also important. For me, I do try to fit in at least a little bit of leisure reading, and it's now springtime right now in Ottawa and also in Toronto too. So I took a walk actually in between finishing work today and before coming to the webinar, which was fantastic. Also trying to find at least a bit of humor in maybe the everyday moments. I could tell you recently I saw a Facebook video that a Facebook friend had posted, which showed a black and white Newfoundland dog who is still technically a puppy, but is big already and was tall enough to put its front paws on the edge of a bed and was looking eagerly at a cat that was lying on there and was trying to signal to it, like, I want to play. But the cat was just lying in a ball and just wasn't having it and wasn't responding to the dog's invite to go play. It just stayed on the bed, and eventually the dog gave up and took its paws right off the bed. So humor like that is funny. And I could also point to a autism and mental health resource that I was involved in being an advisor for, which was the Autism Mental Health Literacy Project that was done by York University. I was one of the advisors for the project. That project resulted in a guide as well as a video series which illustrates most of the main points in the written guide, which are information about autism and mental health, both the positive and the positive and negative aspects of mental health, as well as concrete information should there be any times of mental difficulty. There are also sections that are tailored for family members and parents, and also for self-advocates as well. And it is certainly available on the York University website for anybody who is interested.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much for that. I know we're going a little bit past everybody, but I want to give Charlene a chance to give her final piece before we shut it down. Any ideas that you have that haven't been mentioned yet about how to stay resilient in while championing and advocacy, positive advocacy?
Yeah, so I'm a pretty organized person, type A personality, you could say. So I take some comfort in knowing what the plan's going to be. So part of the way that I help plan for myself is to begin having those discussions, and I recommend this as well for other siblings, is to begin having discussions with your family, with your parents, about what the caregiving role is like, as well as what the advocacy role is like. I think that siblings have always grown up knowing that there is a certain amount of pressure on them, of knowing maybe of what's to come, and it even more so. They talk about the sandwich generation. You have adults who will be caring for their own children and maybe their aging parents at the same time, and siblings even have more of that, because in addition to that, they may also be caring for their sibling. So I think that it's important to just recognize the fact that it can be a lot of pressure at sometimes, and that's okay. You can sit with that, reflect on it, and give yourself the space to know that you're not going to know everything right away. You're not going to come up with the quick fixes. You're always going to want to do better, and so you're on this learning journey, and it's okay to ask for help. So that's how I kind of think of it.
Excellent.
And as far
guys,
as I'm going to give one last plug to Siblings Canada. It's previously known as the Sibling Collaborative, and it's an initiative of the Canadian Centre for Caregiving Excellence. It's an organization that helps siblings of people with developmental disabilities to carry out their changing role. And I think you also have the website link there that you can share with viewers as well.
I do. It is in the resources section. Sorry for cutting you off, and thank you so much for that. And in general, guys, I think we could have done this for 2 hours. There was a lot to kind of talk about. But with that, unfortunately, we have run out of time. Everyone, the election is coming soon. This is a time for positive advocacy. Hopefully, we've inspired you today, or given you some pointers at a minimum. We've heard, expand your network, reach out to friends and family, get involved in groups, and talk about it. So this webinar will be recorded and available on demand tomorrow at the Autism Ontario website. If you know anybody who you think may benefit from the conversation and the dialogue that we had tonight, please share the link. Not only does it help get the word out, but the more people who watch these webinars, the more webinars we are able to put on for you. And with that, I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank our panelists, and on behalf of Autism Ontario, we look forward to seeing you at our next Autism Ontario event.